Hello everyone, welcome to this special edition of the Scorpio Audio Club. This is exclusive content for patrons of timelineastrology.com. And this is the preview of 2024. I'm going to take a look at the main aspects, the bigger players, and the big themes that they're bringing in the year. And I'm not going to really look at all of the minutiae of the transits, all of the faster moving transits, although I might hit on them at some point if I feel like it is important in terms of the bigger themes. So the bigger themes, of course, always are reflected in longer term transits, the slower moving planets, the outer planets, the Uranus, Neptune, Plutos, the Jupiter and the Saturns. And of course, these are the big hitters for every year. This year, they're doing a lot of interesting things, including Mars, which is doing a lot alongside those planets. Mars is going to meet with all of these planets, and it's going to do some very interesting things as well. So Mars, obviously, being a key player, I'm going to focus on that a lot. Venus is always, of course, important, but it's not as big a player in what's happening in 2024 as it was in 23. But again, there's no planet and no thing that we can leave out in another way. I'm just trying to keep this simple for this particular preview. So the first thing I want to say, and the bigger thing that's happening, I feel, in 2024 is the change of Uranus from Aries to Taurus. Now, if you're listening to this, imagine you do know that I use the sidereal zodiac and that I'm not referring to the tropical signs at all. So this is a big shift. And it means that at least Uranus is moving out of the sign of war and it's into the sign of resource, which is Taurus. It's all about the economy moving forward. It's all about the impact that recent wars have had and will have on the economy and the changes that have to happen now in the economy. So we're going to see a lot of changes financially. We're going to see a lot of changes in the economy, like big changes like we haven't seen ever before. The last time Uranus was here was 84 years ago. 84 years is the cycle of Uranus. And the last time Uranus met with Jupiter in Taurus was in 1941. Now, if you know your history, you know that 1941, of course, was World War II. And actually, it's when the US got involved in World War II. They entered World War II because of Pearl Harbor. But it was also the year that Germany invaded the USSR at the time and was the biggest mobilization of troops into any country and actually the biggest casualty of troops also. So Uranus moving into Taurus conjoined Jupiter by the summer isn't necessarily such a great thing in that respect because it means that things can really escalate now in terms of wars. At the same time, I do think that on the other side of that, we're seeing some things improve, I think. Because Jupiter in Taurus alone is this new way of approaching the economy, the challenges that are likely to be presented because of wars. I do feel that there are some potentials here that wouldn't have been there otherwise if we didn't have these challenges. And of course, that's the way life goes, right? It's when we have challenges that solutions must present themselves. We have no choice but to deal with the issues. And actually then by doing that, we come up with better solutions and not put things off. In a way, that's what I want to say about 2024 more than anything else, is that unlike previous years, recent years, since 2020 especially, things I think are going to start happening quite quickly. Things are going to happen quite easily. Changes are going to be implemented that could not have been in the previous years. And that's essentially because of Uranus moving into Taurus in a trine now to Pluto in Capricorn. Because since 2020, we've had a square between Pluto in Capricorn and Uranus in Aries. And that has shown the conflict around the world, but it also has shown the conflict within our own selves in terms of our own individual needs, that's Aries, and the needs of the many, that's Pluto in Capricorn. So now it's Uranus in Taurus trining Pluto in Capricorn. I feel like there's more of a possibility here of implementing changes that consider the failing systems, that's Pluto in Capricorn. That's an ongoing influence now for many, many years. And while we acknowledge those failing systems, we must now implement new ones. And of course, this likely means new banking systems, new currencies, digital currencies, all of that, or the beginnings of that. The other thing, of course, about Taurus is all about resources beyond the banking systems. It's all about food. It's all about energy, and especially energy infrastructure. This is going to be a key thing in 2024 because the lunar mansion that Uranus moves into and Jupiter both move in May and June of 2024, and Mars will also meet with Uranus here in July and August of 24. The lunar mansion is Kritika. Kritika is basically the Pleiades, and it represents infrastructure and energy, power grids, and all of these things, and especially because it's the Taurus division, because Kritika spans Aries and Taurus. But the Taurus side of things is more about infrastructure. It's about fixed, solid, earthy sign Taurus, but expressed through this lunar mansion, which is about energy. Kritika is ruled by Agni, the god of fire. Fire and energy and all of that obviously is reflected in the energy grid. So we're talking about, and we could also bring in the internet and all of that, but especially even just the basics, like the energy grid, like power, like electricity. There are a lot of indications here in the past for this lunar mansion being impacted in big ways when energy infrastructures were implemented, when actually the power grids and the overhead electricity lines were actually even installed, when a Saturn transit instigated that. So now we have a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in this lunar mansion. It just shows that there's a new ways of implementing and sharing or supplying energy. And again, it may be because of disturbances. It may be that power grids are down. It might be that there are many blackouts. It might be that some countries are attacking other countries in terms of their energy supplies, whether it's oil, whether it's electricity, whether it's the internet, blackouts, all of these things, and whether it's other countries attacking other countries' power grids, or it's even solar flares that are peaking as well into mid-decade. So that could be another reason we can see maybe a power outage, and more of that throughout the year 2024. So that's a big theme. The war situation, like I said, historically Uranus and Jupiter conjoined in Taurus in 1941, and then Mars squared this configuration when the US was dragged literally into the World War II because of Pearl Harbor. So that's a bit worrisome, of course, because we're having a similar configuration. Mars squares Uranus and Jupiter actually in Aries this time. So Mars will be exalted in Capricorn and then square Uranus and Jupiter in Aries in the spring. And then Jupiter will move into Taurus on the 1st of May, and then on the 1st of June, Uranus will join it. And then in July and August, Mars will join them. So really, we've got a lot of trigger points here throughout the spring, summer. Again, in terms of the wars and in power outages and all of that, and attacks in general, and also natural disasters. We could say earthquakes, tsunamis, all of these kinds of issues. So lots going on in 2024. I mean, the fact that obviously the climate change is a whole other thing and continue to escalate. Obviously, it's not going to get better. You know, it's getting worse because there's nothing being done about the climate issue. So when you look at these kinds of transits in that context, it means that we're just going to see an escalation of those kinds of problems as well. So again, more floodings, more fires. And the other thing that's happening is that the lunar nodes, Rahu, Ketu, the north and south nodes, are now settling into Pisces and Virgo. And that itself shows more flooding potential. But it also shows many other quite complex situations where, again, very basics are challenged, because now we're talking about Ketu and Virgo, the earth sign Virgo. And with Rahu in Pisces, we're going to see a lot of confusing things, and we're not really sure what to think about it. We're going to get a lot of conflicting reports. We're going to see a lot of confusion in 2024 as well. And so other things about Rahu in Pisces, of course, is all about religion and belief and institutions of belief. And of course, religious institutions will be affected by this. Maybe even the Pope. We might see a new Pope. We might see some challenge to the current Pope or the current system. And again, current belief systems. We might see, again, very confusing things coming out of that sector as well in terms of religious leaders and all of that. Saturn is in Aquarius, and I feel that if we didn't have Saturn in Aquarius, I think we would be in a very different place right now. I think things would have escalated already to the point of world war, and also even nuclear attacks, and also even stock market crashes and the economy being severely challenged, all of these things. And these are still potential in 2024, by the way, so not taking them off the table. But what I want to say about Saturn in Aquarius, because Saturn in Aquarius aspects Aries, and so all the planets that have been moving through Aries have been impacted by Saturn. It's kind of what's held everything together more recently. But now that Rahu is moved into Pisces, it's no longer under the thumb of Saturn in many ways. And now that Jupiter is moving into Taurus, it's moving into a square to Saturn. So I mentioned the trine of Jupiter and Pluto, which is more helpful in a way, which can be good or bad, of course, in terms of things can happen quite easily and escalate in a big way. But now we have Jupiter move into a square to Saturn, and Saturn no longer is strongly aspecting Jupiter. They do aspect, of course, squares are an aspect, but special aspects in Vedic astrology show that Saturn doesn't have as strong a force on the fourth house from itself. Well, what you might say about that is that generally, Taurus and Aquarius are conflicted already. And what we might see here is a conflict between these new systems, these new monetary systems, this new banking system or new currency, digital currency or whatever, the new power grids, the new power systems, the new implementing new whatever systems that have to keep up with the outages, have to supply energy and food in other ways, and new kind of productions of food in some other ways. I think we're going to see many things like that. But that's directly conflicted with Aquarius, which wants to progress things, while Taurus wants to kind of keep things steady. And in a way, there's no keeping things steady in 2024 because of Uranus and Taurus. If it were just Jupiter square Saturn, Jupiter and Taurus would show this need for, let's keep things steady, let's keep the economy going, let's keep everything, safe and secure for everybody. And at the same time, Saturn is saying, no, let's progress things. We need a new system. We need new structures. We need to think about the AI thing that's being implemented as well. And all of that is Saturn in Aquarius and the fear that's been generated around that. But the thing is, it's not just those. It's also Uranus. So it's Uranus now squaring Saturn. Uranus and Jupiter in Taurus squaring Saturn in Aquarius. So it's like there's no possibility for keeping things the same. Essentially, the economy is changing, the monetary systems are changing as Saturn continues to change and challenge the status quo that are in direct conflict with the new monetary systems. And why would that be? Well, it's essentially because monetary systems need to be quite secure. You're not going to invest in something unless it's secure, and obviously the stock market and cryptocurrencies are not secure right now. And that's going to feel conflicted on its own, but it's definitely going to feel conflicted with these new implementations of AI systems and so on, and new humanitarian concerns that are cropping up all the time and escalating. In other words, how can you keep a system feeling safe and secure when you're also changing it and fundamentally changing it, not just changing it somewhat? It's like a complete and utter overhaul. So it all feels very conflicted in many ways as well, and very uncertain with all of these many changes that are happening. And again, at least that as the old system is collapsing, this is no longer an option to go back. We all know that now, at least. From 2020, there was always this kind of sense of, well, maybe we can retrieve what's been. And in 2024, we know now we've turned a corner and there's no going back. We just have to keep going. So 2024 is just going to be one of those years where I feel like a lot is going to happen. Now, I want to mention, before I wrap it up, the new moon in April, because the new moon in April, on April 8th, is a total solar eclipse. This eclipse on the new moon in April in sidereal Pisces is the new lunar year, and therefore this new lunar year from April is highly volatile. It means that the potential for further escalation in war is there. It means that economic challenges are there. It means that all kinds of changes and challenges are there in 2024. There's no denying all of that. But it means also that the kinds of innovations we're going to see in 2024 are going to leave our heads spinning. What we're seeing, though, for this new moon solar eclipse, total solar eclipse on April 8th, is a combination in Vedic astrology called Shula Yoga. This is the trident of Lord Shiva. And the trident means three, so it's the three-pronged fork he holds, the trident. And it's a highly volatile configuration when you have all of the planets, all of the visible planets at any rate, lining up in just 3 signs. So now we have a new moon, new lunar year on April 8th, a total solar eclipse, and all of the visible planets lining up in just 3 signs: Aquarius, Pisces, and Aries. It means that this is a highly volatile year coming. That obviously is something to be worried about in terms of the wars and the economy and all of that and the fallout from all of those things. And in other further wars, like I'm talking about it escalating beyond the borders of where it is, but also in other regions of the planet, like other regions like China and Taiwan, for example, and who knows where else. But this is conflicted. This Shula Yoga is, to quote B.V. Raman in his book 300 Important Combinations or Yogas, Shula Yoga is defined as such, and this is when somebody has it in their birth chart more so, but when we see it in the transit, we're going to see this kind of effect. So results: Shula makes one devoid of wealth. So there's one indication that this is going to be in a challenge economically. Makes one devoid of wealth. Courageous, though. It makes one courageous. Makes one cruel and possess marks of wounds received in battle. So obviously, this Shula Yoga and this new year coming up from April is going to be obviously a lot about war and economic challenges. And although there is courage that we're all going to experience, but even beyond that, it's like we're at the edge now, we're on the precipice, and we feel it and we fear it, and we're not sure of anything. But when it happens, when it hits, what ends up happening is that something in us kicks in. We get a lot more courageous. We deal with our problems. We do that personally because when we see what's happening in the world at large, we realize life is short. People are dying. People are challenged. The very basics that people have thus far relied upon are no longer there. So we don't take any of that for granted. We take what we have, we appreciate the basics, and we are more courageous in doing the things that we know we're here to do in this life, because it's short. Life is short. And that's what it's going to feel like in 2024, I feel. And that's the very last thing I want to say about this year, and that is Mars. And Mars's role and key role in the year. Because Mars is going to be very strong all year, but it's going to end the year in a very precarious situation. It's starting out the year in a very strong position. It's moving into Sagittarius. It then moves into exaltation in Capricorn. And then it squares, as I mentioned, the Uranus, Jupiter in Aries in its sign. So that's highly volatile into the spring. But then it meets with, it's met with Pluto in exaltation in Capricorn. That's already volatile. It then meets with Saturn in Aquarius later in the spring. It then meets with Rahu, the North Node, in Pisces. And then it moves into Aries before then meeting with Uranus and then Jupiter in Taurus by summer and late summer. Really throughout the whole beginning of the year, spring and summer, right through the end of the summer into the autumn, Mars is very powerful, but very powerfully triggering all of these big indications that I mentioned. And then finishes out the year in Cancer and then stations retrograde. And then retrograde in Cancer is kind of like this sort of turning things around where it's initially weak, but then it gets really strong again. And so we're going to see a lot of Mars type of activity in 2024, in other words. A lot of triggers. And this is where the courage of this Shula Yoga is required. It's like the Shula Yoga, remember, is 3 signs activated. All the planets heaping up in just 3 signs. Like the trident of Shiva. It's sharp, it's destructive and all of that, but it's also courageous. And I think we need to personally use this time for that. We need to think about it in that way, because there's nothing we can do about world war. There's nothing we can do about the global economy. We can't do anything about that, but personally we can use these transits to really build this courage to deal with issues, to tackle the issues in our own life. So that's all I want to say for now about 2024. This is kind of like just a brief introduction to what I think is going to be a pivotal year in the decade, in our lives. And a lot more to be said about any of those things. But I will, of course, write more and more about these things for patrons. If you follow me on timelineastrology.com and also on this channel, you will find more And if you have any questions, please feel free to post below, contact me, go to timelineastrology.com. You can find a contact page there, and you can find an email to send me off an email. It's info@timelineastrology.com. And yeah, I wish you all the very best for what I think is going to be a highly volatile year that has a silver lining also. And maybe I should leave it on that positive note, that ultimately I think that these changes that are brought about because of escalating issues around the world are going to be more positive changes ultimately. I mean, ultimately, everything is more positive because it means that it has to get really bad before it gets better kind of thing. So think about it that way, that we do need a new monetary system. The old one is collapsing. We do need a whole new world order. The old one is not working. We do need a whole new way of being in the world. We need a new way of working, a new way of earning, a new way of being, a living, a new everything. We need to reinvent ourselves in this year. And 2024, if I was to give it any kind of title, might be just that. It might be the year of reinvention. So I wish you all the very best, and we shall explore more of these in great depth as we go through the year. Okay, hope you enjoyed, and until next time.